them who saying so, friends, little do they know that all of them go dead before Calypso. I see this same Calypso has outlived rock and roll.
6:15 in Trinidad and Tobago. People have been singing about the death of Calypso for decades. But it's not going anywhere. It's part of the culture. But there'll be many lamentations about that. But it's interesting that that refrain that we were just listening to was saying that from Lord Superior, saying that Calypso will live on. And indeed, it's lived on long beyond most people's lifetimes, and indeed will survive all of us. You can rest assured of that. Well, good to have you back with us, by the way. The independent report into the island-wide blackout in Trinidad on February the 16th was handed over to Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley on Tuesday by chairman of that cabinet expert-appointed committee, that's retired Professor of Electrical Engineering Chandrabhan Sharma. Well, last week, the majority union at T&Tec, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, via their President General, that's Ansel Roger, claimed that a fallen tree was the cause of the outage. Well, yesterday, and we were talking about this, the 10th meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee was due to meet at 2:30 in the afternoon with the intention of conducting their own inquiry into the blackout. And the question was, what sense does that make? But the meeting was postponed. It's now been postponed to April the 27th. So let's see what happens on April the 27th in 3 weeks' time, that they're going to have their own inquiry into something that there's been an independent inquiry on. By the way, the OWTU says they were not approached by any investigative committee to participate in the process. And to give us some context with that specifically, we're joined now by the Executive Vice President of the union, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, Reesa Ramlogan Jodha, to give us some perspective on the situation. Ms. Ramlogan Jodha, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning to you, Fazeer. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. It's indeed a pleasure being here.
All right. I suppose the obvious question would be, why would the independent investigators have to consult the OWTU on their investigations?
Well, Fazeer, in this particular situation, as a major stakeholder, the independent committee did in fact meet with the union to get the union input on a number of matters surrounding the blackout which took place. The union was very appreciative of the fact that the committee recognized the input, that the valuable contribution that can be made by the union. And we did welcome the opportunity to meet with them, and that meeting did take place. So we are left now to see what is the outcome of that investigation. Okay,
well, let me correct myself, because I stated in the introduction that the OWTU was not approached by any investigators. But so I'm glad that you're correcting it right now, that there was interaction between the OWTU and this independent investigative committee as far as this specific investigation. Am I correcting that situation now?
That is correct. The issue that the union would have raised is the fact that OWTU, as a recognized majority union at T&Tec, was not approached or invited to be a part of the investigative committee, an internal investigative committee at T&Tec. And the thing is, the union only found out about an investigation taking place internally yesterday. And we were able to verify that an investigation did take place internally, and that investigation has since been completed. But I would want to take this opportunity this morning to Fazeer to make it very clear that the Oilfields Workers Trade Union would reject any investigative report arising out of an internal investigation, especially since the Commission is no stranger to the fact that accidents and incidents of this nature usually always involved a representative of the Oilfields Workers Trade Union.
Okay, well, I'm glad that we clarified this thing, because I'm sure I confused a lot of people with the way I presented it. So I mean, the amount of investigations that are apparently going on with just this one event was getting very interesting. But again, so the OWTU was not invited to be part of the internal investigation at T&Tec, but was involved in the interviewing process with the independent investigation.
That is correct.
So thankfully we've clarified that, so I didn't leave people totally confused with the situation. But okay, is it standard practice when an incident occurs at T&Tec that requires an investigation for the OWTU to have representation and input in that investigation?
Most definitely. Most definitely. When there are incidents involving workers, you would find that the representatives of the local branches will be appointed to sit on those committees. When there are incidents or accidents of a more serious nature involving members of the public or incidents in the public spaces, you would find that the executive of the OWTU is usually asked to provide a representative to sit on that committee. And in this particular situation, that did not happen. And to make it even worse, it did not happen, and the commission did not even have the courtesy to inform the union that an investigation into this incident, an internal investigation, was taking place.
But how does that happen? I mean, is there a tremendous deterioration in relations between the management at T&Tec and OWTU that something to that extent could happen, that there be an internal investigation and the recognized majority union, as would be standard practice, as you just mentioned, would not be invited? Is that a representation of a breakdown in relations between T&Tec management and OWTU?
It most definitely is, and it also is reflective of what takes place when you have, for instance, in T&Tec in particular, a board has not been in place for about 4 to 5 months now. Since the end of last year, there has been no board at T&Tec. And then you have a general manager who tends to think that he's a law unto himself. So you'll find that he will do, in the absence of a board, whatever he thinks he wants to do. And this is the result of what takes place in a situation like that.
And therefore, and again, because we are dealing with many different situations here, just so we could drill down to the OWTU situation, are there outstanding matters in relation to relationships with negotiations with T&Tec over respective bargaining periods? Are those among the outstanding matters that remain on the table at this time?
Yes, so there are quite a number of issues that face us as T&Tec OWTU. And it has in fact reached that place where the union had to seek the hearing of the line minister, which is the Honorable Marvin Gonzalez, that's the line minister for the public utilities. And sadly for Fazeer, we would have had an introductory meeting with the line minister almost about going on 2 years ago. And there was a promise to meet with the OWTU to continue the discussions, because we would have obviously highlighted the deteriorating industrial relationship between parties as one of the issues which had to be addressed. And sadly, to date, that meeting never took place. The union would have written on more than one occasion, reminding the minister that that meeting is outstanding, and the meeting is yet to take place.
So, okay, again, forgive me for sounding repetitive here, but I think it's important that we establish this, that you were told at that introductory meeting 2 years ago, well, he was August 2020, so maybe a year and a half ago, around that time, that there was a commitment for follow-up meetings with the union on outstanding matters related to T&Tec. And up to this time, despite the communication from the OWTU side, no meeting has yet taken place with Minister Marvin Gonzalez. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I would also say, following the introductory meeting, the union would have again written to the line minister. A response did not come until about 5 to 6 months after, acknowledging receipt of the union's correspondence. The union would have again written, providing an agenda of the items to be discussed, and for Fazeer, that meeting is yet to take place. And the thing is, it is at a critical state. We went through this entire COVID-19 period, and we would have raised with the line ministry, we would have raised with the Ministry of Health, we would have brought it to their attention that this thing just wasn't working out, because the commission was intending on doing whatever they wanted to do, disregarding the fact that there was a recognized majority union at T&Tec. And I mean, it is very poor, the lack of response coming out of the various ministries. And this is a state-owned enterprise. T&Tec, as they would have correctly indicated, is an essential service. Why is it as an essential service in times like these, the union is highlighting the fact that there's a deteriorating relationship, the management seems to be just running haywire, there is no real attempt to take a hold of what is taking place at T&Tec.
And therefore, and again, we are waiting I don't know if the Prime Minister will make us aware of the information from that independent inquiry, but do you draw a direct line from this deteriorating situation at T&Tec to the blackout on February 16?
Yes, as the union, we would have identified one of the major issues which would have resulted in that blackout was not just the fallen tree, it was the involvement of contractors. And that is an issue that the union have been raising for quite some time now. I don't know if members of the public are aware, but there's definitely a parallel workforce that is operating in T&Tec, and that is contractors. While our collective agreement caters for the use of contractors, the clause that deals with contract labor is clearly being abused by the Commission. That has been raised on numerous occasions. It is even one of the agenda items that was up for discussions with the line minister, right? And I am really hoping that investigation would reveal some of the root cause of the problem which would have led to that tree falling.
And just on that point, and I highlighted it a few days ago, that Marvin Gonzalez, a couple of days after, well, I think the day after the blackout, he said as part of the preliminary investigation and the information from Mr. Ramsuk and so on, he said it is quite evident, it is quite clear that there was no sabotage, that's one part, or nothing from a human perspective that would have resulted in that disruption that would have taken place yesterday. So he was speaking the day after the blackout. The blackout was on February 16th. He was speaking on February the 17th. So that seems to fly in the face, unless it was zombies cutting down the tree, that there was no human involvement in that tree falling down and hitting the lines.
There were no immediate human involvement on that particular day. But the reality is that that tree would have been the responsibility of someone. That is the case because that tree, if the persons that were involved in the maintenance of that particular feeder, if they had the necessary training that was required for them to do their job, they would have realized that if that tree fell, it would have come in contact with T&Tec's line, which obviously the blackout was one of the possibilities of what could have happened. And it would have been, the situation would have been corrected. But sadly, that was not the case. And I'm really hoping, Fazeer, that the facts come out in this investigation that was done, the cabinet appointed team, that investigation, and that a real attempt is made to treat with some of these situations that are currently existing at T&Tec. Because the reality is, it is putting the Commission at a place where one, the service that is being provided to the members of the public, it is being compromised. You have a category of skilled laborers, workers, within the Commission, and their functions are being taken and given to contractors who don't have the necessary training and expertise to conduct the work that is required of them.
Could I ask you, well, I'm glad we're clarifying quite a few things here, because that issue with the tree, is it your understanding that it wasn't a case of somebody cutting the tree, that it fell on the lines, but because of not properly maintaining the thing, that it actually fell, or a branch fell on the, is that what happened without anybody cutting it at the time? Is that what happened?
That is correct, Fazeer. That is correct. So okay. if while the tree fell, any act of God could have resulted in the tree falling. That tree was not supposed to come into contact with the lines.
Okay, I understand it very clearly. So actually the minister was right saying that there was no actual human involvement at the time.
That's correct.
But again, just to clarify, so you are saying that there are people at T&Tec who have been trained, who have been paid with taxpayers' money to do things like tree cutting and maintenance to ensure that these lines, nothing like that happened to those lines. And they are sitting down there at T&Tec, being trained and prepared to do that. But the job is being given to private contractors, is that correct?
The majority of the jobs are being contracted out. That is the situation we're facing. And I would have raised the concern that in some instances you're finding you have these guys going out in the field to work, to perform work, and outage is required for them to do what they have to do. When they're out in the field waiting for this outage to take place, they're finding out after the fact that the persons responsible for ensuring the outage was sent to facilitate contractors. as opposed to T&Tec workers. And this is the kind of things that are happening at T&Tec.
And therefore, in the time that we have available, we just have a couple of minutes before we wrap up, and we thank you for taking the time to be with us. How confident are you, or indeed hopeful, that this investigation will actually bring out the facts of the situation and indeed action, corrective action, will be taken?
Well, the union is hopeful, I must say. The fact that the committee saw it necessary to come to the union as a major stakeholder, to interview the union, to get the union's perspectives, that in itself says a lot. And we would have made it very clear that at the end of this, we would expect that a copy of the report be made public or be furnished to the union. And I mean, there are certain questions that are yet to be answered. We are hoping that that is the case with the investigative report. And the reality, Fazeer, is that the OWTO will be ready to respond whenever the findings of that investigation is made public. If the union is satisfied with what was presented, that will also be communicated. But we at this point in time, we are just waiting. We wait to see what is going to happen.
And on the broader issue of the general relationship between OWTU and T&Tec and the lack of communication with the line minister, Marvin Gonzalez, are you seeing any encouraging signs as to anything that will indicate that there could be an improvement of that situation?
Well, not at this time, not at this time. And the general workforce is realizing that there is not enough attention is being paid to T&Tec by the relevant line ministry. And at the end of the day, there's only so much that workers can bear. And it may very well come to a place where the workers will have to eventually take a stand to ensure that the attention that is needed at T&Tec at this point in time, that attention is given to T&Tec, because it is quickly deteriorating.
And again, very finally, just to clarify a lot of things, because I'm often guilty of presenting misinformation, and I take responsibility for that. But you were saying earlier in our discussion that there's no board of T&Tec in operation at this time?
That is correct.
And that has been the case
that has been the case since the end of November, I believe, or start of December. I think it's in the end of November, the board was dissolved, and to date, the board has not been reappointed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Reesa Ramlogan Jodha, Executive Vice President of the OWTU. Thanks very much for taking the time to be with us once again.
Sure.
6:32 in Trinidad and Tobago. It's now time to remind you of the COVID-19 protocols. Wear a mask over the nose and mouth when you go out in public. Keep your distance from others. Stay home if you're ill. Wash your hands often with soap and water, or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cough into a tissue onto the crook of your elbow. Avoid touching your face. Sanitize those hard surfaces, tabletops, handrails, doorknobs, trolleys, and cell phones as often as possible. We'll be right back.
This man is so unconcerned, I don't know when he'll appreciate what's his own.